Good morning. Today is the 30th day of Shvat, the 9th of February. When we have 2 days, a 30th day in 1 month, and the next day after that is the first of the next month, so we celebrate, or we commemorate, it's not exactly a celebration, Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month, for 2 days. The reason for that is that the reason that there will even be a 30th day in a month, when I think that most people know that the lunar month is 28 and a quarter days, so at most it would be 29 days. How did it suddenly become 30? Is because there is a doubt about whether the witnesses could come during the 29th day, the 29th day, and so we add a 30th day. And the way we commemorate it is that the 30th day and the first day of the next month are considered to be the first of the month. In any case, maybe we'll have an opportunity at some point to go deeper into that calculation and why it works out that way. But today's therefore the first day of the month of Adar, of the first Adar. Another small point to know is that we said that this is an intercalated year, which means that we have two Adars. The one that's added is actually the one that's now. The first Adar is actually the one that's added. The second one is considered to be the regular Adar. And the way we know this is because we celebrate Purim in the second Adar, not in the first one. And there is always this idea that the end of the year is the month in which Purim is. So that has to be the second month, actually, not the first. Let's get to our reading today, the sixth reading of Mishpatim. The sixth reading of Mishpatim has a very special phenomenon in it. And that is that it has exactly 6 verses. It's an interesting thing to check whether there's another such thing that the sixth reading of any of the Torah portions has 6 verses. But we call this self-reference, the ability of the Torah to speak about itself. Remember that these readings are not necessarily the same division as the verses, meaning they were done a lot later. The Torah was divided into readings sometime in the beginning of the Second Temple period. The Torah was divided into verses by Moses. So we have here either somebody put their mind to it and they said these 6 verses should be the sixth reading, or there's a deeper reason for it. In any case, 6 verses, and we're going to focus on the 6th verse, which reads, "You shall serve me, Havaya, your God, and I will bless your bread and your water, and I will also remove illness from your midst." What's special about this verse, except for the fact that we get a blessing for bread and water, is that this is the first time that we explicitly have a commandment to serve God. Again, it begins, "And you shall serve Havaya, your God." What does it mean to serve God? So there's many types of services. One might say, maybe that's the temple service. But there are separate commandments to serve the service of the temple. So this is not talking about that. Maimonides holds that it is a commandment from the Torah. It is a mitzvah deoraita to pray every day. He is disputed by others who claim that this is not a commandment from the Torah, this is rather a commandment from the sages. But Maimonides brings 2 verses as his proof that this is a commandment from the Torah. This is the first one. And the second one is actually from the 6th reading of Parashat Eikev. And the 6th reading of the Parashat Eikev is the 2nd paragraph of Shema. And there we say, La'avod et Hashem Elokechem, to serve Hashem your God with all of your heart and with all of your might. There it doesn't say uvachol modecha, that's in the 1st paragraph. And so interestingly, they're both in the 6th reading, here in Mishpatim and there in Eikev. Now, apart from this being the first place that it tells us that we need to serve God, We haven't learned anything about the tabernacle yet, because if you recall, the tabernacle is something of a repercussion of the sin of the golden calf. That before that, God wanted to dwell directly in the people, but after the golden calf, there had to be like an intermediate, and the intermediate would be that he would dwell in the tabernacle, and from there we would access godliness. So there's no mention yet of the tabernacle. So when it's saying this, it can't even be talking about the tabernacle, as Maimonides says. This is talking about serving God in some other way. And the sages say, and this is what Maimonides is basing himself on, that service of the heart is prayer. And so according to Maimonides, there is a commandment to pray every day. What does that mean, to pray every day? You don't have to have a siddur. You don't have to have a prayer book. To pray every day is literally to say to God, hello, I'm here. It's to acknowledge. It's to have any kind of conversation, any kind of acknowledgement of the connection between man and God. That is prayer. Of course, over the generations, prayer has become something much, much greater than just that. Now, this is a very interesting end to the Torah portion of Mishpatim, which was entirely about the laws between men, the different legal laws, the legal system that comes to govern the relationships between people. So the end of the parsha, and we mentioned this on the first day, the end of the parsha is a complete deviation from the beginning. Instead of dealing with the laws between man and man, it switches completely to the laws between man and God, and perhaps what is the most important one, which is the commandment to pray. Now there's a lot of very interesting things about this verse and the sages. I want to only talk about one of them, and this became a very common custom in the Jewish world, that when people make Havdalah, when they do the ritual around wine and the candle and spices on Motzei Shabbat, when Shabbat ends on Saturday night, there's a custom, and some people do this all the time, even when they make Kiddush, to have the wine spill out of the goblet. And where did that come from? It came from this verse. How did the sages learn this? This is in the Tractate of Eruvin, page 65a, folio 65a. And they say like this: He will bless your bread and your water. What does that mean? So they say, bread is something that can be bought with the money of the second tithe. What does that mean? That there, apart from the tithe, the tenth that we give from all the produce that we have, there's also a second tithe. The second tithe is on the first and second and fourth and fifth years of the sabbatical 7-year cycle. So on those years, the second tithe is to be eaten in Jerusalem. It has to be eaten in Jerusalem. But it's hard to carry produce, so the sages gave us a simple way out of this, which is, not just the sages, it's in the Torah, that you can take the produce and convert it into money, and then when you come to Jerusalem, you spend that money on food, and it's considered as if you ate the tithe in Jerusalem. So what can you buy with that money that you took from produce that was your second tithe? You can only buy bread, but you cannot buy water. So but there's a whole question here, which I haven't seen the commentaries talk about, but it just means that I haven't looked enough. There's a whole question about how did they even come to this first idea that the bread here is the bread that was purchased with second tithe money. Well, it seems to be clear, actually, because the beginning of the verse is to serve God. So what bread is a bread of serving God by everyone? Bread of serving God by a priest could be anything that he's given as a tithe, or as a truma, as we call it. But what is equal for everyone? What is the same for everyone, every person? So he says the only type of bread that I know that would be considered a part of serving God is either bread that is part of a sacrifice, for instance, a Thanksgiving sacrifice, we make a lot of bread, but that still would not be by everyone, because it could be that not everyone brings a Thanksgiving sacrifice. You don't have to. There's nothing that requires you. But the second tithe, everybody has to give. So because of that, we have bread that is service of God. On the same idea, the water should also be water that serves God. But how can you make water that serves God by every person? There's no such thing. So the sages say the water here is called, the wine here is called water. Really, it's talking about wine, because wine is one of the things that you could purchase with your second tithe money. What do they learn from this? That why was the wine here called water? Because, and this is the statement, a house in which wine is not spilled like water does not see a blessing. Meaning that the blessing comes from equating wine with water. There's a simple idea that wine has to be in the person's house like water. What do they mean by that? They mean that we should all be drunk. They mean something entirely different. They mean by that spilling wine is a symbol of overflowing wine, but the wine itself symbolizes connection between people. There's a very important statement, גדולה לגימה שמקרבת, that taking a sip of wine is great because it brings people together. Wine brings people together. There has to be a feeling of solidarity, of social connections, of having a positive social life. A person should not live alone. That's basically what's being said here. So he's saying here that in the same way that when you serve God, it means that you're connecting to God. In the same way, I'm telling you that you should connect to other people. In other words, your house should be a house in which wine is spilled like water, in the sense of that you have people over and that you eat together and you drink together and you enjoy each other's company. To put it, to connect it immediately to something that we know today, there's these places called blue zones on Earth, areas where people are able to regularly reach 100 years old and more. And one of the things that's common to all these places is a strong social fabric. And we know that in most of these places, the way that the social fabric is strengthened is by partaking together of meals. The idea that we have meals together, that he blesses our bread and our wine, and the wine should be spilled like water, that's something that gives a person a blessing and removes illness from them. So this is a very interesting verse. It says there are two aspects that bring you to long life. The one is prayer, is being connected above, and the other is being connected below. Being connected above is through prayer, through connection to God. Being connected below is by being connected to other people, and of partaking meals together and drinking together. And this is type of social drinking, which again the sages commend. They say alcohol in this way is something that brings people together. And with that, we'll end our discussion of this parsha. I hope to see you next week, all in good health, and that we should also get a chance someday to partake together of the wine, of the bread and the water. All the best. Bye-bye.